Welcome to the new JFK Show number 194. As we turn over our half-hour hourglass, tonight we have our special guest we consider on our team. It's Amy Joyce, and she's got fantastic research. And when you look at the Zapruder film, it's always been talked about as the most examined film in the history of all films. And guess what? There's more to find in it, and we're going to talk about it tonight. So we've got Amy Joyce, Larry Rivera, Dr. James Fesser, myself, Gary King, and we will have Don Fox in just a moment. He'll be joining us real quickly. So we should we go with Larry first? Or should we go
of
with
course.
Good.
Yeah. All right, Larry, go ahead and steer the ship for us.
Gary, that's a great introduction for tonight's show, because Amy has only been researching the JFK assassination for a couple of years, but today and this past week, she has made a major discovery in JFK assassination investigation, which just blew my mind. And I'm just honored and humbled, that I was able to take her research to another level by just looking at it and applying my experience in imaging, and to just completely show that a lot of the what's been believed about the what happened there in the doorway is going to change tonight as a result of what we're going to present here. Not only that, but the Zapruder film, Jim. And I know that you and Douglas Horn and John Costella have, and even Jack White, since 20 years ago, you guys have been working on this. And I think it all comes to fruition here because of Amy's discovery, in the sense where the Zapruder film, not only does this discovery confirm that the Zapruder film has been altered, because what I'm talking about is what you, Jim, have been mentioning so many times before, about the film not comporting with the reactions of the people that are in versus the motorcade as it's rolling down Elm Street, and the people not actually paying attention to it. And I think what we're going to see tonight is a great example of what you have been talking about for so many years.
Right, they weren't paying attention because it wasn't there at the time that footage was taken, where they used the techniques of optical printing and special effects to combine a foreground that had been filmed previously.
That's right.
With a background that was filmed when the motorcade passed by.
That's right, and I think the evidence is clear, and we're going to see it tonight. And we're going to kill two birds with one stone, because we're also going to deal with that most controversial issue of the doorway, and in this case, Gorilla Man. So if you want to go ahead and
I think actually 3 or 4 birds, Gary.
Oh yeah, well yeah, with a lot of corrupt so-called researchers, very prominent researchers, and agency attorneys, and people that I'm sure they're going to be very nervous, after this.
Yeah, just another day on the JFK Show as we.
That's right. Just one more JFK Show and another major discovery.
That's all.
Okay, you can scroll it a little more, Larry, if you want me to read.
Yeah.
Amy Joyce finds Gorilla Man in Zapruder and Skaggs films. JFK researcher and image specialist Amy Joyce appears to have finally solved the mystery of Gorilla Man seen in the John Martin film. In this blog post, I present compelling evidence that the man seen in the Martin film is not Billy Lovelady.
Let me go there for a second. We did this show last year, remember? And we did, where Robert Groden went to Denver, Aurora, Colorado with Kenneth Bruton in November of 2013. And they took this very underexposed image of the man, who we have Christian Gorilla Man. And in this recording that surfaced later on, and this is the image that mentions the existence of this recording, these 4 cassettes, everything, 2 original micro cassettes, where Billy Nolan Lovelady and Patricia Lovelady were interviewed by Kenneth Boone and Robert Groden back in 1976. And they happened to produce this photograph. This is a slide from the John Martin film. In that recording, in that interview, Kenneth Bruton is constantly talking about Billy Lovelady wearing a beard, and trying to create the image of Billy Lovelady having worn a beard that day in a crew cut. And obviously, this checkered shirt, this red, black, and white plaid checkered shirt, which we all know, we're gonna find out now, what that is all about. But back in 1976, it was presented as an underexposed image. But then later on, when Robert Groden republished the film, all of a sudden, it wasn't within the normal color values.
Or even slightly overexposed.
Yeah, well, and then he even published it on page 187 of his book, Killing of a President, where a lot of people later on noticed the pocket flap, remember? And this is a side-by-side comparison, and they said, wait a minute, how can Billy Lovelady be wearing a shirt?
Same shirt.
Yeah, we've done this, so many times ad nauseum. And then later on, I did this overlay with the the profile of Billy Lovelady at the FBI photo shoot of 29 February 1964, and overlaid it onto Gorilla Man. And it was obvious that it was not the same individual. The differences in the size of the cranium, the profile, the chin, the ear, everything. So with that as a background, now we come back. It all comes full circle, okay, with Amy's discovery, because Amy had been looking for Gorilla Man in all kinds of films, not just the Zapruder, but she did in the Bronson and the Hughes and everything. And this has been like her pet project, and I really commend her for taking the time to do this.
All that research effort is coming to fruition, reported to the public tonight.
Yeah, and so like I said, once she alerted me to this, to the what was going on here, I just went and analyzed it, and I did what I do, with imaging, and I made quite a few discoveries. Actually, some of these that she said that. She didn't notice it until I brought him up, but I will let her talk about that, in a little bit.
Don's joined us.
Yeah.
Amy, why don't you just say a couple of words about how much you've been pursuing this for all these years?
Oh, it's only been a couple of years, and for a long time, it's playing catch up with what a lot of you guys have been doing. I wasn't aware of many of like second generation researchers coming forward, and how long this controversy over Billy Lovelady being Doorman and Gorilla Man has been going on. So I was quite surprised to find out how much it really proved.
Yeah, it's very, very significant. Well, it was just perfect for you to be in contact with Larry, who's done so much work on this and was in the position to integrate it and bring out its significance, which he's presenting here tonight.
Man,
I was surprised that when Amy told me, I spoke with her the other day, that she said that one of her first exposures to the case was when she saw the JFK Horseman on YouTube, and I said, "Wow,
wow!"
That's beginning at a pretty high level.
Yeah, it's actually a little embarrassing that we've been at this probably a combined 75 years, and she walks in a couple of years with her associate's degree, and it's like smoking us. Well. Or at least, right alongside with us, as a competent.
And by the way, Don, welcome to the show.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Sorry about being late, but I am here now.
No problemo. All right, continuing. This information is also dealt with in Chapter 7 of the JFK Horseman, which is entitled The HSCA Activities of Kenneth Bruton and Robert Groden. Amy has found an individual wearing the exact same clothing as Gorilla Man, locating him in a J Skaggs slide. His position is among the crowd on the west curb of Houston Street, as a JFK limo has just made the turn from Maine onto Houston. The escort seen in the foreground is Officer Douglas Jackson.
And this is the circle here is the man that we're going to focus on tonight. As you can see, he's got a receding hairline, okay, and he's wearing a checkered colored shirt. All right, so, and he's in the exact position relative to where we're going to look at, we're going to analyze where he is in the Zapruder film, and it's going to be quite compelling. I think everybody's going to enjoy this, quite a bit. You want to go ahead?
Skaggs' position was right at the corner of Elm and Houston Streets on the east curb of Houston. Here he is seen in Botham photo number 3.
Yeah, right here, the red arrow.
Now you can see he's holding his camera up.
That's
just
right.
in front of Nellie. You can see it just over her head.
That's right. That's right.
Amy has also located what appears to be the same individual in the Zapruder film, where he's seen in frames Z193 through Z218 walking along the colonnade which borders a reflecting pool in that area. Here is Costello frame Z205 showing the area in question.
Yeah, and relatively small area, Jim. And as we were talking about earlier, before we started recording, everybody, when they watch the Zapruder film, they don't even focus into that area. They're always looking at the limos, and people on Elm Street, but nobody ever bothered to look at that area until Amy did. And I think it's a great observation on her part.
I completely agree. You want to scroll further, Larry? Yeah. The frame clearly shows the clothing he was wearing, a checkered shirt with denim blue jeans. Also note the bald spot is already visible. Jeff Fetzer has repeatedly pointed out how Gorilla Man, seen in the Martin film, is a well-built individual who's practically bursting out of his shirt. That's exactly what we see here. And just to add a point, becomes obvious later, it's buttoned up to the neck.
Exactly. And here, I want to, if you can see here, you can see a flesh tone here on the top of his head here, Jim. And I want to go down and yeah, okay. And you can see that it's not uniform, where the hair does not, it's not uniform, and you can see a sort of flesh tone. And in other frames of the Zapruder film, we can see that. And I also want to point out the angle here, the slouch, as Mr. Wizard mentioned, the way he called it, of the neck, okay? And when we analyze Gorilla Man, that's exactly what we see. And, I think just, from these two images, we have compelling evidence, but we have so much more here
Yes.
Yeah.
Here is an animation and stabilization of those slides which track his movements during this period of time.
Yeah. Let's just keep this up there for a little bit. These are, like we said, frames 193. I skipped a couple because they were way too blurry, okay? But you can see, Jim, that each frame, the Zapruder film was, 18.6 frames per second?
18.3.
Yeah, 18.3. But some people, in actuality, for example, Roy Schaefer said that they were close to 24. But when you consider the speed of the film and how fast you can judge, how fast he's walking here. He's at a brisk walk, okay. But by judging by the apertures there, of the wall there.
And he's really swinging his arm. When you're really walking, your arms swing more.
Well, there's a reason for that, Gary. We're going to find out now, because actually I stop it here for 1.5 seconds, and maybe Amy can jump in here and tell us what we're seeing here.
Oh, right. He's a smoker. So in the Martin film, this same guy is smoking and blowing, smoke around the ladies' faces as they're standing on the steps of the school book building. But as he's walking, he's also dragging on a cigarette. And I think it's he's picking up with his right hand. Mm-hmm. And, and as Gary's saying, his left hand is going backwards. And he's turning and he's blowing smoke out. Yeah. And that's just something that's very
Peculiar.
characteristic of this man.
Very peculiar.
Gorilla Man on the steps, he was smoking. He had the bald spot.
Oh, no doubt about that. We're gonna see that in a second. But yeah, here I'm gonna focus here. Oh, okay, here you go ahead, Jim. You can.
He is moving south to north, walking at a brisk pace with a purpose, parallel with Houston, right along the reflecting pool, which is located there. Watch closely as frame 200 shows him lifting his left arm and hand as he takes a drag from his cigarette. I have paused the animation for 1.5 seconds at this point to show the movement. Here is frame Z200.
Yeah, this is the one I wanted to pause here for a second. As you can see, this guy, he's, taking a drag from a cigarette. He's in a hurry. He's not looking towards the motorcade at all, and that's something that we're gonna focus on in a little bit. But this guy, who was this guy? What was he doing? He is, and furthermore, if you look at the other people around him, they're not looking in the direction of the motorcade. They're looking towards as if the motorcade is still on Houston Street, Jim. So
which hand is he smoking with?
From the left. One.
He's smoking with his left hand.
Yeah, this is his
so
right.
He's left-handed.
Well, people smoke from both.
Larry, I smoked for 10 years. Believe me, 4 packs a day. So I know a lot about smoking.
So you smoked.
You're telling me, but the point I'm making is Billy Lovelady, I'll bet, isn't left-handed.
Oh well, I don't think that Billy Lovelady is even, in the conversation here, because he's supposed to be.
Larry, it's just one more proof, all right? When you get the proofs in mind, you think about them, all right? So
Absolutely.
if I let it go for now, I might not come back to it. So I'm saying there's another consideration. This guy is doing exactly what Gorilla Man is seen doing in the Martin film, smoking a cigarette. What's even stranger is that the African-American woman standing left of him is wearing pink rollers. What does this mean? It means that not all of the people congregating around the TSBD entrance right after the assassination were TSBD employees. It also speaks volumes about the Dallas Police Department lack of control in that area at least 10 minutes after the event.
Yeah, and this is what I'm talking about. You see this African-American woman here with the pink rollers?
There he seems to be smoking with his right hand.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
He's got the cigarette in his mouth.
That's right. And
so he's right-handed rather than left.
Yeah. But the point here is that some people have, they think that this has been superimposed here. Okay, and it's pretty obvious that is an African-American woman, with pink rollers, in her hair, and I think that's so amusing,
Yeah, once you realize what it is, you see, it's before you crystallize. But my grandson, we had an unusual windstorm here, and it blew a trampoline on top of one of my plum trees. And I saw a photograph, and I said, what in the world is that? And we showed the photograph to my grandson, and he said, what's that trampoline doing in the tree? He recognized it immediately. Like, you could look at this forever and say, what in the world is that? A woman with pink rollers, see it, but it comes into focus.
And what is she doing at the TSBD entrance right after the assassination?
And who wears rollers to the parade?
I know.
Well, if you forgot about it and you were having your hair done and then you realize this was your only opportunity to ever see Jack and Jackie, you might rush out with your hair still in rollers.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, she might have somewhere to go. She might be getting married. Who knows?
No, it's more likely the timing, she just realized belatedly that they were coming and she wasn't going to miss it, even if her hair was in rollers.
Yeah, that lady's got a scarf on, I mean, she's not dressed.
Maybe she was also in her bathrobe and slippers.
Seeing as how
Here's the slow motion video clip of the sequence. Go ahead, Larry.
But the parade route was published in the paper. She should have known what time it was.
Don, things can slip your mind, believe me.
Let me get this here, folks. Okay, yeah, we can run this a little bit here. Again, this is the action going on there, and he's smoking with his right hand, and he's blowing smoke. Okay, let me just run it here a couple of times here. See what
Larry,
he
it's just so outrageous they want to palm this guy off of on us as Billy Lovelady. I mean, what an insult.
I know.
What
I really
an
think we should
insult.
explain. I really think we should explain to the audience exactly what all this means about.
Gary, yeah, we're gonna get there, Gary.
Okay.
Well, you know, that Billy Lovely, it's not even close to being the same guy, you know. Now, you know, the implications are just enormous here because, you know, was this guy a double? What was this guy doing there, you know? And
is Billy Lovelady even a smoker?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, he is a smoker.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Remember the photo shoot, the FBI photo shoot? You know, he's got the pack of cigarettes there in his left pocket, you know, with the vertical striped shirt. Okay.
So Groden really blundered when he had to did the shoot with a shirt with no pocket.
Exactly. You know, and you know, that's such an insult, you know, to people's intelligence, Jim, because, you know, they just thought that, hey, you know, nobody's going to notice that, you know, and it's
that's because Doorman Oswald didn't have a shirt pocket.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why he was trying to hide it so that he could portray him as Doorman.
And you know something, Amy, I think that one of the reasons that they darkened, you know, the slide that they went to show Lovelady and
run it again, Larry. Yeah, run it again. Go ahead.
Yeah, they were the underexposed slide. You know, it seems to me that they were trying to hide that pocket, and in doing so, they had to invent and concoct that cockamamie story about the beard. You know, that him wearing a beard. This guy is not wearing a beard. You know, it's so ridiculous. You know, to even say anything like that. This man is not wearing a beard. And the only reason that they started talking about that is because the image that they went to Denver, to Colorado with, was the underexposed version of this film, of this image. And that's where they start to invent things about the beard.
It's funny how they're using a man without a beard as the beard, which of course is afraid in the theater for a disguise. In this case, to disguise Billy Lovelady, you know, as though he were Lee Oswald, when the whole thing is these are so conspicuously three completely different figures that the idea of merging them is absurd beyond belief.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we can go ahead on here.
For those who think Gorilla Man has been artificially inserted into the film, here's a side-by-side comparison with the hues showing the exact same event from slightly different perspectives.
And this is what I'm talking about. Okay, here's the woman in rollers. You can't see her over here, okay, because you don't have enough detail. But you can see.
Well, that's her, though, Larry. We had your pointer.
This here is her. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this one here might be this area here.
Of course.
Yeah, that's her.
Right.
Of course.
And you can only see his head, the top of his head. Okay. So. But basically, you're getting the same scene from two different angles, from two different perspectives. Okay, so you know that's why you know if you're going to start to say that the Martin film has been fabricated, that Gorilla Man has been inserted in there, you know, I just, you know, you have to first, yeah.
Just to elaborate on Gary's point, they were so intent on obfuscating the fact that Lee Oswald was in the doorway of the book depository. They sought to make out that it was actually Billy Lovelady, who was in fact standing beside him with his arms raised to protect his eyes from the sun. But where they resorted to this man in a black and red checkered shirt to claim that was actually Billy Lovelady and that he had been the man in the doorway, when we know now from all this research, including especially now Amy's a brilliant find, that these were three completely distinct individuals.
That's right. That's
There we go.
And the you know, we've done, obviously, you know, we know that the case of the man in the doorway is closed as far as we're concerned. but we still have to go into this other aspect of the cover-up, because that's what we're talking about here. This has to do with the cover-up.
Right, in which Robert Groden played such a preeminent role.
That's right, and Kenneth Bruton also, because they're the ones that, led the way, and they went over there with the underexposed.
How much do you think they were being paid to do this chicanery, Larry?
Well,
I mean, it's embarrassing. They had to be doing it for money.
Yeah, Larry, introduce Kenneth Bruton. Tell us a little bit more about who he was.
Well, he was a young 32-year-old lawyer. He's from Gainesville, Florida. He works under Henry Gonzalez. We all know that Gonzalez was in the motorcade, that he was a representative from San Antonio, Texas. He was a Democrat. And he was he was passed over for chairman of the HSCA committee. Okay, and he was a little mad about all that, and he brought on this Kenneth Bruton to be one of the attorneys, one of the counsels there. And he actually worked under Richard Sprague, the first head attorney for the HSCA for the investigation. And Richard Sprague only lasted about 5 months.
Well, that's because he was going to approach it seriously as a homicide and look at motive, means, and opportunity. And they began shitting bricks. They knew that would lead actually to exposing the whole charade, and therefore they had to get him out.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned that, I have to also point out that he said that he was going to subpoena whoever he had to subpoena, and that he wanted records from the CIA, from the FBI, whoever. And he knew
what he was doing.
Yeah. And
made him a dangerous man.
And that's right. And the very first guy that he brought in was David Atlee Phillips, okay, because he knew the importance of
brilliant choice.
Of course. And then the next thing he did, he sent Robert Groden and Bruton to Colorado. Now, this is where I have a little bit of a problem, okay? Now, did Sprague know about this? Did Sprague know that Bruton and Groden were going to show Lovelady falsified images, okay? Or was Sprague in on this, and knowing what you just said, Jim, that he wanted to do a full investigation and that he was later fired because of that, I have to conclude that he didn't know anything about.
Larry, he was an honest man. That's why they had to give him the boot. Now,
did he know that Bruton and Groden were going to show Lovelady? We're going to go to Denver.
I'm quite certain he did not.
That's what I'm saying. Because, so this is what brings you to believe that this whole scheme did not reach all the way to the top. It stopped right there with Bruton and Groden, Jim.
Well, look how perceptive it is to focus on David Atlee Phillips, because when E. Howard Hutt, on what he believed was his deathbed, recited the chain of command to St. John, he said the order went from Lyndon Johnson to Cord Meyer to David Atlee Phillips,
right,
and from him to William Harvey, and from him to David Sanchez Morales, and then Ed Lansdale, George H.W. Bush, the shooters in Dealey Plaza, and the rest of the gang.
That's right. And I want to point out also, talk a little bit more about Bruton, since Gary asked me to. He was also sent to Mexico City, all right? And during the same time that they were sent to Colorado within weeks. And right after the deposition of Atlee Phillips, and since Atlee Phillips had so much to do with Mexico City, they send Bruton and this other guy, Jonathan Blackmer, to Mexico City. And the first people that they wanted to interview were the Tarasov couple, Boris and Anna Tarasov, and they were the ones who worked for the CIA, intercepting telephone calls and translating calls between the Russian embassy and whoever they were talking to. And the reason for this is because they wanted to know, and they wanted to verify, is if Lee Oswald actually spoke to somebody in Russian at the Russian embassy. Okay, so this is how this all plays out, and the importance of Groden, because Groden goes to Mexico City and he goes to Denver, Colorado. These are two of the most important missions, Jim. And I talk about this in the book, where Groden is charged with two of the most important missions. A, if Lee Oswald went to Mexico City and interacted with the Russian embassy, and B, if Billy Lovelady was really a doorman. Okay, so that's why Groden is so important, and he's sort of like fell between through the cracks here in the JFK thing, and nobody has ever really questioned who this guy was, what he was doing, and so forth and so on. So that's why I dedicate an entire chapter in the book to his activities. So,
by the way, there are photographs of either Henry Wade or Jesse Curry speaking to the press, and it may have been Henry Wade. We're right in the front row. You can see a man who appears to be David Atlee Phillips.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a break right there. This is the new JFK Show number 194 with Amy Joyce, our special guest. All right, Larry, go get some water, man.
Yeah.
You want me to pause?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to get a cough drop. No.
All right, welcome back to the new JFK Show number 194, and we're proud to say that Amy Joyce is our guest. We do have a full crew. We have Don Fox, John, and Larry Rivera, and Dr. Fetzer, and we just had our old friend Nathan Lawrence stop in during the break. So, all right, we're going to let Amy go ahead and pick it up, if you don't mind. Go ahead, Amy.
No, sure, guys. I was just thinking about what led me to find this, and it was the recent show. I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the Lovelady tapes. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the doorway man and Gorilla Man and the whole controversy over that. And I thought, well, maybe he could find them. I didn't know how deep it went, though, and what it would mean about how far this went back. We're going to, what, like 76?
Yeah.
To Groden's work trying to develop Gorilla Man into Doorway Man, or even before that. So I'm really happy to have found him now. I was just looking for proof that he couldn't be Doorway Man, because I solidly believe that it wasn't him. I mean, for me, there was already enough, the button-down shirt, the busting out of it, and the T-shirt being exposed, and then the timeline. I didn't think it could be him. But the fact that what I'm learning now about Groden and how far they actually took this to try and prove that Lovelady was Gorilla Man and Gorilla Man was Doorway Man, that just shows me more that it must be Oswald. They're going to such lengths to try to prove it wasn't, and they're busted.
The corruption found, and right smack dab in the middle is Robert J. Groden.
Amen.
Wow. Amy, you said it in like 3 seconds. They wanted Doorway Man to be Billy Lovelady, and they wanted Gorilla Man to be him, and it couldn't be Lee in the doorway. It only took 2 seconds.
Well, couldn't be him.
Well, I just
find him somewhere else, right? It can't be him.
Weisberg wrote a private manuscript that was never published called Picturing the Corruption. And in that book, he talks about his relationship with Robert Groden. And it's not nice. He does not have nice things to say about Groden. Let's just put it that way. And like I said, it's unpublished. You'd have to go to Weisberg's site to get a copy of it. And, because they had a falling out after JFK, the movie, because Groden became consultant to Oliver Stone. So in a sense, Groden controlled, what was being shown in the movie, especially the sequence there on where they were mimicking the Zapruder film, which we all know that Groden kept from the public, the best slides of the Zapruder film. If you want the information, you can read about this in Jim's book, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, specifically the chapter called Pig on a Leash by David Lifton. And you can read all about how Groden interfered with the investigation of the case. And as Jim has said, and I agree with Jim, that he's the only person on the face of the earth who continues to promote that the Zapruder film is authentic. What do you have to say about that, Jim?
I know, it's completely outrageous. To this day, I can give proof after proof after proof, and he still stands pat. It's outrageous. He and Josiah Thompson have been two of the most corrupt operators seeking to sabotage advances in research in JFK for the last 3 decades.
Now, now I think we're down here to, we did the animation, and I think we're down here because I wanted to look at Z217.
Right. It's a blow up of frame Z216. Gorilla Man is still smoking.
Yeah,
That's where we left off.
As you can see, he's extended his arm here. And now this is Costella 217. Now, again, the limousine is well down Elm Street here, Jim, and everything that's going on here. But you look up here, and these people are not facing the limousine. They're not facing, the motorcade.
Everyone would have turned around.
What's going on?
That's a nice point.
Look, all you see here are people's backs. What are they interested in the press buses and that kind of thing? What's going on here?
You're absolutely right. They would have turned around to watch the motorcade as it proceeded down Elm Street.
Are you kidding me? Your eyes would have been following the motorcade every second. It's
called human behavior.
That's right. That's right. The President of the United States, and you're ignoring him, and Jackie and everything. What's going on up here? So,
right,
so what I'm trying to say here is that this is a byproduct here of Amy's discovery, okay? Because she made us focus on this, okay? Yeah. And you have been talking about
heretofore underexplored area of the Zapruder film. 100% correct.
That's right. And again, this does not work out. This does not comport here. There is something wrong here, Jim.
I agree, Larry.
So
very nice.
Yeah, and the isolation here again, and I want to focus here because this is the best part of this whole presentation here. You see this at the top of the head here, because this is the one frame where which is mostly visible here, the bald spot of the guy. Okay. And if you want to go ahead and pick it up here, I think we're here. Yeah, here we go.
An isolation of frame Z217 shows him just before he disappears from the Zapruder film.
And here he is. And
here's a close-up showing the same bald spot seen in the John Martin film, which is also seen in other Zapruder frames.
Yeah, I mean, this is so obvious here. Even though the image, as you zoom in, it becomes a little distorted. But this is unmistakable, Jim, right here.
The similarities are so striking that even the forward tilt or slouch of his neck is seen in Z217.
That's right.
Yeah, that's why it kind of looks funny, because he does have the way he sticks his neck out.
Yeah.
Like that, and it's in the exact position as he is in the stills from the Martin and Hughes.
Exactly.
Actually, Ralph knows there's a technical name for that. It's some kind of syndrome that you have this forward neck.
Right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. That's right, Jim. That's right, Jim. Yeah, absolutely. So, so it's like what Nixon used to say: if it walks like a duck.
Yeah. If it ain't got the
walks
flap,
like a duck, quacks like a duck.
If it ain't got the flap, it's a bunch of crap.
There you go. There you go. So
So what does this all mean? First of all, those who claim Gorilla Man to have been Billy Lovelady 10 minutes after the assassination, hanging out in front of the Texas School Book Depository entrance, have a major problem. If Lovelady is Doorman, then how could he also be roaming around Houston Street as the assassination is unfolding? A second, even more disturbing problem, Why is he not turned around facing and following the JFK limousine as it's already traveling down Elm Street well to his left? The view from that position was unobstructed. So what was this guy up to? If the identification of Gorilla Man in the Skaggs and Z film are correct, Kenneth Booten and Robert Groden appear to have a lot of explaining to do since they went to Aurora, Colorado in November 1976 in representation of the HSCA to show Lovelady the underexposed Martin film and obtain his positive identification of himself therein. Really outrageous what they were doing as a form of subterfuge to sabotage the integrity of the investigation, which, of course, was a charade any way you cut it.
That's right. That's right. They got, like I said, they got a lot of explaining to do, Jim. This is
a lot of explaining to do.
You know, let's sort of like summarize this, okay? He's wearing a checkered colored shirt, okay? He has a bald spot. He's smoking. He has the exact same body type, all right? And, you know, there are just so many similarities, you know, the neck, the slouch of the neck and everything, the bald spot. You know, how can you, I mean, any intelligent person, you know, would have to conclude that there is something wrong here, that this guy, there's a real possibility that it's the same guy.
Larry, flip back to your earlier presentation, which you know.
Sure. That we did last year.
Yeah. Flip
Sure.
back there. You were showing, yeah. And you go through some of what's going on here. I mean, it's just monstrous when we now have, you know, some of the blanks filled in. It's just incredibly monstrous how brash it was for them to attempt to perpetrate this deception on the American people.
That's right. This is what we have here on the screen is a supposed statement, a positive identification of Billy Lovelady, which is written on the back of this image, this one right here. Okay, what they did was they took this photograph and on the back of it, they wrote this. Okay, the man standing in the entrance of the doorway with the plaid shirt on is Billy and Lovelady. Billy, now I hereby identify, and then Patricia also signs it. And here up at the top, supposedly K.E. Bruton on 11/13/76, and down here, guess who also signs it?
Robert J. Groden.
That's right. Now
11/13/76.
That's right. So I went and fished out, you know, Billy's. I went and found Billy's actual signatures from his statements, from his affidavits of November 22nd, and both of these are the original ones. As you can see, this is in an ink pen. Okay, and I actually found these. These are the original ones. Usually, you just find photocopies, facsimiles, but these are the original.
Notice how he does that little loop-to-loop at the bottom of his B, capital B.
I mean, well, you know, Jim, you know that I sent this on to a handwriting expert, Kim Johnson, and Kim, we've done this, you know, a couple of times, you know, where she clearly says the two signature exemplars look little alike. You know, one is bigger. I mean, we did this. You know, this is already.
Let me read that, Larry.
Sure.
Clearly, the two signature exemplars look little alike. One is bigger than the other. One uses a middle name, the other does not. In addition, there are numerous variations in letter formation accompanied by major differences in at least 7 different separate graphology areas. Furthermore, other than diacritical heights, upper zone widths, and capital widths, there are no modes measurements alike. However, I did not anticipate that the diacriticals, upper zone, and capitals would fall within the same mode. This gives me a bit of pause. Kindly remember that such measurements are mostly subconscious, driven, and automatic. That's because they had another handwriting expert fake the signature. That's what that means.
Well, you know, this woman is an expert. This woman, you know, testifies in court, you know, and she has a degree, okay, in this science, Jim. You know, we're talking about an expert here. Okay?
Talk
Amy,
to us, Amy.
Did you want to add, Amy?
No.
I'm good.
You know, so then in red, you know, which is her summary of the whole her study, you know, the man standing in the entrance contains a lie. In other words, the writer is lying when he identifies the man as Billy Ann Lovelady.
Identifies himself as Billy Ann Lovelady. Yeah, good.
Yeah, so, you know.
So they wrote his signature.
Yeah, they faked his signature.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you could tell it's different. I mean, you don't.
Yeah, I mean,
A woman signed it.
Well, you don't have to be an expert, Amy, but it helps when you are one. It's like looking at the brain in the diagrams and photographs of the National Archives. It's almost a fully intact brain. I could tell you that can't be the brain of JFK because he had half his brains blown out in Dealey Plaza. How much better that conclusion is drawn by a world authority on the human brain, Bob Livingston.
So then you have, I know, Bob Livingston and David Mantic, you know, I mean, who else, I mean, better than that, you know. But you know, I went and I did this because I didn't want people to, you know, say, oh, you know, you're biased, you know, and this and that. This woman didn't even know who Billy Lovelady was.
Right.
She didn't know anything about this, Jim.
That's right.
She was completely objective. She didn't know anything. And
these the same, authored by the same hand, and she concluded they were not.
That's right. As if, you know, as if we were in a court of law, you know, she was presenting, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You know, and give me a report. That's all we did, you know. And this was her, you know, her study. And in fact,
conclusion.
Her study is 13 pages long, where she even does psychological profiles. Okay, based on just the handwriting.
Which like the world famous forensic artist and photographer from the Houston Police Department who identified the three tramps.
Oh, Lois, yeah.
Yeah, Lois Gibson. It was Charles Rogers, Charles Harrison, and Chauncey Marvin Holt. I mean,
yeah.
You know, they get these nitwits talking about these real tramps as though they were serious participants in the assassination. I mean, it gets beyond absurdity.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, and again, it all goes back to, you know, when you get the images and everything and you do overlays, you know, and then you do overlays on the signatures, and then you go back to now Amy's discovery.
See that one there on the Martin film. I like this here. We got the analysis. I like that. I like that, Larry.
Yeah, because this is like, you know, the 0%, and then as we overlay, and you can see the chin, okay, the position of the ear, even the size of the head. You know, the chin here drops, you know, vertically, you know. I mean, there's so many differences here, and which obviously was not Lovelady. And then when we do photogrammetrics here, you can see even the head was much larger, okay, as we superimposed. You know, and we lined up the eyes as we always do, you know, interpupillary. But in this case, you know, we were able to line up the eyes and the ear and try to, you know, do the overlays. And as you can see, the ear is not even in the right position. The nose, completely different. Okay, so, you know, then you've got Amy's discovery. And another thing, let's not forget that when in the same tape where Groden and Bruton go to Denver, to Aurora, Colorado, and at this point they ask him, would it have been possible from where you were sitting, from where you was, that he could have been there? He's talking about Lee Oswald. And Billy says he could have. Okay?
Could have been.
He could have been there. I mean, Gary and I took, you know what, weeks to transcribe this. Remember, Gary, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, till we found the good tapes.
Yeah, and then the good tapes, and I went over the good tape, and he still said could have, you know? So
I want to solicit Don's opinion about the extent to which this expose solidifies the position of Robert Groden in the history of JFK research.
Okay, I just wanted to make one point. You know, towards the end here, Larry on the blog, it says, a second, even more disturbing question is, why is he not turned around facing and following the JFK limousine as it is already traveling down Elm Street, well to his left? Well, my thought on that is because on the Zapruder film, the people in the background were that was a different time.
Yeah, it was taken at a different time.
Yeah, the limousine, the film had been altered. So the people in the crowd were, the limo was superimposed over the people in the crowd at a different time. So again, I think that just speaks again to the alteration of the Zapruder film. Not so much that Lovelady's acting suspiciously, it's that he was filmed at a different time. That the limo wasn't going by when he was filmed.
Yeah, but that's not Lovelady up there. That's Gorilla Man.
Yeah, well, yeah, or whoever it was. Yeah, Gorilla Man or.
Yeah, but also.
What you really mean, Don, is this, that they may well have been looking at the presidential limo when that top part of the film was filmed, and then it was integrated using the techniques of optical printing and special effects with other elements from other films to produce the combined effect that appears to be anomalous for the reasons we've already addressed.
And let's not forget what the motorcycle cops, based on the Fred Newcomb tapes, described what really happened down there, Jim.
Yes. I want to draw Amy out again about her take, having seen this discussion. Amy, what's your impression overall about what you have?
Well, that's surprising that, he's walking down the street, like Don said, and he's looking the other way. And what does that mean? Because in that first picture at the corner that Skaggs took, he looks really happy. I mean, he's into the parade. He's really wanting to, check out the president and the first lady as they're turning the corner. So it's very doubtful that, after that happened, he's going to, scoot up the street to go back to work and not be, following them. If he's going to be walking down the street, he was going to do that while the limousine was going, while the limousine was crawling down the street.
Who was this guy?
Down Houston. I was trying to figure that out. And I was looking at some of the witness reports, through the list and, throwing the ones that were obvious out, the females and those that were up on the overpass. And then I realized how hard it would be because of the timing. Because we're seeing him, he says, well, I was at the corner. That's not when the shots occurred. And where was he when the shots occurred? We just don't know. Was he on Elm? Did he turn the corner already? And
notice in the animation here, Jim, how the people behind him, they're facing Houston the other way. Look at the woman here in the blue. Look at this.
Right, he's walking behind them.
Yeah, it's a different time.
Past them, behind them, yes.
Hey, scroll down to where it says Ball, the attorneys that had the magic bullet.
What?
Where it says Ball and the attorneys.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I saw it.
It must have been on the other page, Larry.
He meant from the earlier report.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. You want me to go back there?
Yeah,
I think we're seeing a manifestation of the observation of Vladimir Lenin that the best way to control the opposition is to lead it.
Yeah.
Well, when I went to Dealey Plaza for the very first time, I got his magazine, and he was controlling it from right then. And they had the Billy Lovelady story in that magazine. I still have it. It's a little thin.
I'm sorry, that shirt that he was wearing didn't even have a pocket.
That's right.
The one that Billy Lovelady was actually wearing there's no pocket.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's phony.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If the shirt ain't got no flap, then that picture's a bunch of crap. That's what I said.
And Groden is so audacious that he publishes this on page 187 of his tremendous book, which has been lauded by so many people, Killing of a President, page 187.
Remember, the best mix is 80% truth and then 20% fakery.
Yeah, and this is what you see on page 187, Jim, and you go, wait a minute.
I know.
Excuse me.
It's outrageous.
How can, wait a minute, you got to be consistent here, I think, and obviously, there's a major problem here. And now that Amy has made this discovery, which I think is so very important.
It's analogous to Josiah publishing the double hip theory in such meticulous scientific fashion and then concluding his book by saying, nothing here proves the existence of a conspiracy.
Yeah. And then this is a passage of a letter that Bruton wrote Harold Weisberg, where he is saying, right there.
Let me read it. Finally, in 1977, Bruton wrote Harold Weisberg a letter which includes this passage. Dear Harold, Thank you very much for sending me the copy of your letter to Jack Kershaw. As you know, I resigned from the committee effective March 8, 1977, upon the acceptance by the House of Representatives of the resignation of Chairman Gonzalez. My personal feelings were that the committee had compromised itself to such an extent that their final product has already been discredited. I simply refuse to compromise my personal or professional integrity for a group of politicians, and accordingly have returned to the practice of law here in Florida, as though he himself hadn't been complicit in a major deception of the, under one interpretation, of the other members of the House Select Committee.
Can you believe that? And you know, you have to really listen to those tapes, especially the ones.
I think this is called chutzpah.
Yeah, the ones that our friend Carl Golovin uncovered a couple of months ago, where he found the actual tapes, you know, and crystal clear copies of those tapes. After he asked me in November, you know, if there was anything, because he went to the archives a lot, and he asked me, is there anything there that you would like me to pursue? I said, yeah, I'm looking for the Lovelady tapes. And he goes there and he finds them, you know, and he makes copies, you know, and they're crystal clear. Okay. And the second tape is disgusting, Jim, you know, where they actually brought all of Lovelady's kids to confirm that was him in the doorway, that was him in the Auction 6 photograph. You know, this is such an incredible
you mean they actually had the kids on tape saying these things?
Yeah. They said, I'm Angela Ekstedt, and this is my father in the Auction 6 photograph, and blah, blah, blah. And I was so disgusted when I
but
heard.
It was only an audio tape, right? So they couldn't have been showing them real photographs, and they were describing what was in the real photograph, but they used it in relation to the fake.
Yeah, they were showing them the Auction 6 photograph. This is the second tape, the one that we didn't review, but I didn't have to review it because we already had the first tape, and that was disgusting enough. The second one, you know, is just something that. But they did. They brought all the kids together, and Patricia and everything, and Bruton and Groden. They're the ones that are leading this whole charade, you know, this whole thing. And they said, look, you know, who is this guy here in this picture? And they show them the Auction 6 photograph, and they all in unison say, that's my daddy, you know. And yeah.
Let me ask Gary the same question I put to Don. Gary, how does this impact or solidify the role of Robert Groden in the history of research on the assassination of JFK?
Robert Groden was my hero at one time. I spent many days after Katrina. I ended up in Dallas. That's how I found out all these things. And I talked to him. I trusted in him. And come to find out, it was controlled opposition from the get-go. And Amy's discovery just pretty much buries the fella. And I said to myself earlier today that, you know, he's going to go down in history as one of the biggest frauds in JFK research from the beginning. And he's not the only one that I've held in very, very high regard and has continued to be proven to be a fraud.
Well, something I've always loved about you, Gary, you approached me out in Santa Barbara, and you told me if they aren't 100% true, you don't want to have anything to do with them. And you're finding this guy here, I don't know, was he even 50% true? It's very disturbing.
Absolutely. It's the classic thing, like you said, 80% truth, 20% lies, and your mission is accomplished.
Well, Jim, back in 2013, you wrote a piece in Veterans Today about the challenging case of Robert Groden, remember?
Yeah, sure. It's included in the book, in the JFK book. It's included in JFK How and Why, yeah.
And at that time, you didn't know any of this.
No, this is all solidifying. This is really fantastic. It's so characteristic in the history of science when you have a true hypothesis that there can be unexpected developments in the future that confirm it in ways you never imagined at the time.
Yeah.
Larry, I wanted to point something out, that Skaggs photo. You scroll up there.
Yeah.
You know, so that's Kennedy and Jackie, right? But he's leaning over. I just thought that was a good picture, at least for me, because I know that a lot of people were trying to show that his jacket was bunched up. So, you know, and that's why the bullet hole went in a separate place and whatnot. And you can see, I mean, he's tailored
Yeah.
To the fit, to the T
Yeah.
there. There's no bunching.
And you know what they're actually doing there, Amy, is they're actually looking at the little lamb chop figure that had been given to them.
The dog.
And he's looking at the parade.
Hand puppet.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at the parade, and then all of a sudden, in the other the Z film, he's not, and no one else is either. So,
Don, I know you have other things you want to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last quick point. Okay, so your analysis here on Z217, the Costella frame there, with all those people, they have their back turned to the limo as it goes by. And so again, that just speaks to the point of that the film has been altered, and Groden's claim to fame was that the Zapruder film is authentic, and he's been beating that drum for years and years in the face of all this evidence of just fraud, fakery, and alteration of the Zapruder film. And
well, he also held back the crystal clear slides that he had well, I don't want to say stolen, but that he had misappropriated from what was that Goldstein guy? Remember, Jim? Is that the name of the guy in New York who had those slides? And that he went to work for him, and he took possession of them, and he held on to them for many years. He wouldn't share them with any of the.
As Lifton explains in Pig on the Leash.
That's right. And and he sort of like set back the investigation for many years because he hoarded those, and he hoarded a lot of other images and photographs. Photographic record. Even Gail Nix, the granddaughter of Orville. Claimed that when UPI finally released after the contract expired 25 years after, they sent Groden and Gary Mack to go in and get the film, and all of a sudden, it was missing frames, it had been damaged and that kind of thing, and she went out there and she went in and faced Groden, and she asked him point blank, have you been messing around with my granddaddy's film? And he said no, but she never believed him. It's all spelled out in her book. About the
Gary, do we have a few minutes so we could go to that particular blog? If you could go to the JFK Wars, the challenging case of Robert Groden, we could scan through it here.
all right.
Your screen share.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll stop the share.
No, well, I was going to leave it up until Gary actually got there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay, Larry. You look great.
Thanks.
Just keep talking. Amy, this was really wonderful work on your part. I mean, just
Thanks, guys.
what exactly inspired you to start looking for this guy anywhere in the crowd?
Yeah, I was going to ask her the same thing.
Which one? Looking for
What
Gorilla
got you
Man?
looking for Gorilla Man in the crowd.
Oh, because a few weeks ago you did a show on the Love Lady tapes, right? And I didn't listen to it at the time. I just listened to it last week or whatever, right? The day before I emailed you guys. And,
So you're saying you found this in the last 2 weeks?
yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love
No,
it.
I mean, it wasn't that hard because he was wearing a red shirt.
He was distinctive in his clothing, yeah.
Nobody else was wearing it.
Mystique, yeah.
What's the address?
The JFK Wars, the
it's in the chat, Gary.
challenging case of Robert Groden, the challenge, but you got to put it in the blog at jfetzer.blogspot.com.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Gary, it's in the chat.
Okay.
It's in the chat. Just
That makes it easy.
I'll do your thinking for you, Gary. Don't.
Go ahead, Don. Pull it up.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay, now let me hit screen share and we'll be all right.
Right.
Oops, get that out. And here we are.
There it is.
Yeah, can you go? You can go to full screen or not. You can just start scrolling down because, see, I talk about his accomplishments, and here, look at the section even. Groden's contributions. You can go a little faster, Gary.
Yeah.
But then I begin listing some of the anomalies. He denies the existence of a bullet hole in the windshield. He defends a set of autopsy photographs that seem to be fabrications. He claims his Zapruder film is authentic, which may explain one, except you can actually see the bullet hole in the Zapruder film. He maintains the Elchin 6 is authentic. He denies Oswald was in the doorway during the shooting, but He offers an alternative explanation of his location at the time, which also implies he couldn't have been on the 6th floor. But it's a fabrication to distract attention away from the Alton 6.
And it's a little YouTube sensory right there.
Yeah, there's been so damn much of it you wouldn't believe. Keep going. You see.
My blog is full of those.
Go ahead, Don.
So my blog is full of those YouTube clips that don't work anymore.
Yeah, like that.
Yep, yeah.
I've had to redo my whole academic freedom conference because they took down all the videos, and I'm now having to redo my Midwest 9/11 Truth Conference too because they took them all down. You're going a little fast here. There you can see actually the bullet hole in frame 226, I think.
Yeah.
But here you see on the left in the Alton 6 where the bullet hole, you can see the small white spiral nebula right where JFK's left ear would be if his left ear were visible. And yet in the text above, Groden says, here's the windshield and there's no bullet hole there, when in fact he's blatantly lying when you can see it. And then we have the windshield presented subsequently by the Secret Service with a spider web cracks. Go further, Gary. And here in frame 225, you can actually see it in the Z film. And we got the mortician, of course, talking about the various wounds that JFK incurred. Large gaping hole in the back of the head, described first by our Secret Service Clint Hill. A smaller wound in the right temple, the entry wound that blew out this crescent-shaped flap down. That's a skull flap, shows up pink in frame 374. Small shrapnel wounds in the face. That's particularly interesting because it was David Mandick's realization. Those were called by tiny shards of glass when the bullet passed through the windshield that punctured JFK's face. Wound in the back, 5 to 6 inches below the shoulder, just to the right of the spinal columns, corresponding with the shirt, the jacket, and all the other evidence. I did a whole article about that, a whole lecture I presented at Cambridge, no less, and then published entitled Reasoning About Assassinations. Then the adrenal gains in the brain removed and this most interesting, no swelling or discoloration of the face, meaning he died instantly. And you go down a little further and we can see, you see, there's a Crenshaw drawings of the throat wound, the small clean puncture wound before, and then the small clean puncture wound with a straight line incision after Malcolm Perry performed it. And yet we see what we find at Bethesda. They've altered the wound. They've enlarged it to make it look more like a wound of exit, apparently using information Humes got from Livingston by calling him and asking him what the wound would look like had it been a wound of exit. And here you see the HSCA, where they reconstituted the whole back of the head. And look at the skull flap there. You can see it particularly clearly there. That shows up as pink in frame 374, which I believe is also included here. Scroll down further. We got these anomalous autopsy photographs. All 4 of these are fake. Now, what's interesting is we took a image of JFK, and Larry recently superimposed it. Turned it on 90 degrees, and it's not even the body of JFK. I mean, this is so embarrassingly bad. And it reflects a conversation between Bobby and Jackie when they were deciding whether to have open or closed casket for the laying in state on Sunday, the 24th. And they both agreed that it didn't even look like Jack. The reason being, it wasn't Jack. And here you get the Harper fragment. This is just stunning. If you go back up there to the HSCA, that reconstitution of the back of the head isn't even consistent with a Harper fragment. This is how blatant and outrageous it is. This is why I'm troubled that Cyril Wick hasn't blasted apart the medical panel's findings, because the evidence is overwhelming. It was totally fabricated and fake. Here we get the back of the head wounds. You got McClellan on the left. You got the 2 Crenshaw diagrams he did for me for Assassination Science, published in 1998. Then you go down where Mandick, did his study on the X-rays, the original on the left, and the area P, which he defined using optical densitometry for area patch, which corresponds so much to the wound you can see in frame 374. And there's the pink, the skull flap extending out there. And yet Groden wants to insist that the film's authentic. I mean, this is outrageous. So we get these 3 different versions of the head wound at Parkland, which is authentic. Then Humes took a cranial saw to expand the wound, as you see here, which is defined with mathematical precision in the official autopsy report. which I included as an appendix in Assassination sign. And then you get the HSCA absurdity, where you don't have either of those wounds. All of a sudden now it's a small wound at the top of the head. I mean, how embarrassingly bad is that? No, Larry, you went too fast. Gary, you went too fast. Because here's the real proof right there that, the film was altered, because you can see the wound on the right, but you can't see it on the left. They tried to create the impression that there'd been brains blown out to the right front, but, as Jackie said in her testimony, which they didn't publish on the grounds of privacy, but not really, because it blew apart their story, that from the front he looked just fine, but that she had a terrible time trying to keep his skull and brains together at the back of his head.
They chopped his body. It was a disgrace.
Oh, I know. And here you got Clint Hill. This is at a bookstore in San Diego, where he was talking about rushing forward and pushing Jackie back and laying across their bodies and seeing this fist-sized, gaping, bloody hole at the back of JFK's head, which was obviously a mortal wound. So he turns and gives his colleagues a thumbs down, all of which, of course, they had to take out. This is an interview with Costello, who's done such brilliant work on the film. I mean, it's just stunning stuff. And the indictment of Robert Groden is simply overwhelming. I mean, you have an old inventory of issues where he has been covering up for the government, not pioneering to reveal the truth of the matter. And of course, here, as we have so significantly established, Oswald was even in the doorway, where it was his task, it appears, a special commission from the HSCA to show that it actually was Billy Lovelady. Larry, in the face of all this, what can be said about Robert Groden?
Well, a lot of people don't know the early story of Groden. If you go to Weisberg's site, he's got many documents there and correspondence with him, where Groden and him were actually family. Weisberg became Groden's oldest son's godfather. Okay, so they were actually family. And when after a while, they had this big falling out over the movie JFK, which I mentioned. But earlier in 1976, right after he wrote that book, with Modell, with Peter Modell, he was
Case for Conspiracy.
Yeah, Case for Conspiracy, and I'm just citing, what I've read. Okay, this is not something that I'm stating, for the record. I'm just citing the information there. Says that Groden was almost destitute, that he was in dire need of money. He and his wife and everything, and the correspondence that goes back and forth, where he's asking Weisberg for money and to help him out and whatever. And then that's the summer of 76. But then in November of 76, he starts working for the HSCA. And obviously he doesn't have any money problems after that. So, I'm just throwing that out.
Isn't it remarkable how the taxpayers can be so generous for those who are deceiving them?
Yeah, I always thought he was such, I looked up to him because he was out there in Dealey Plaza, in the rain, snow, and the sleet and all that. And come to find out, if you're going to have controlled opposition, where are you going to put it?
At the top. And then he's in Dealey Plaza selling books and hawking books over there. Conspiracy books.
It was Costello who discerned that they had a very elaborate array of microphones established around Dealey Plaza, disguised as a some kind of water measuring instrument for rain. But Costello, because he's has a PhD in electromagnetism, was able to diagnose what they were doing there.
By the way,
Thompson tried to ridicule him on that basis, but Thompson is a mediocrity. I mean, he's a established deceiver. He attacked Assassination Science, probably the single most important book in shattering the cover-up, calling it Assassinated Science, when it had contributions from David Bantic proving that the autopsy x-rays had been altered, that there was evidence of a second shot of the head, from Bob Livingston showing that the brain in the diagrams and photographs of the National Archives can't possibly be the brain of JFK. Charles Crenshaw talking about his own personal experiences at Parkland Hospital and thereafter. Brad Kazaya, Crenshaw's attorney, and a host of others. I mean, that was a monumental work, and he went out of his way to trash it. He even set up for a review to be done by a guy at the Chicago Tribune who was setting out to trivialize it. I spent at least an hour on the phone describing, while he was ignoring everything I was saying, I in the false belief he was actually going to report what we had found, and discovered it was just a hatchet job. In fact, Tink had even tweaked me before, telling me I'm going to be surprised, meaning he knew that as an insider, that this was a hatchet job because the agency owned so many players in the mainstream media. I mean, these are disgusting people, completely disgusting people.
I was wondering, Jim, if Groden sells any of your books over there.
Yeah, with the same enthusiasm as the Sixth Floor Museum, because as Gary Mack explained, they weren't up to the Sixth Floor Museum standard.
Right, there's too much truth. That's our standard mark right there.
Well,
So, Amy, you have any last words for us, Amy?
Thanks for having me here, you guys. I'm very impressed with that. I was telling Larry, my parents, they met Groden in Dealey Plaza and even contributed to his cause. I didn't think they got a book though, but there was a little,
Little magazine
in there.
Yeah, there's a little magazine. They probably got the magazine.
Yeah. Well, they got the tour. Anyway, it's been fun.
Yeah, the disinformation tour. So as we know, 9 out of 10 JFK researchers are working the other side of the street. And to be honest with you, this one small group in the show tonight, I don't trust that many in less than 2 hands to be not working the other side of the street. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, fellas, new JFK show number 194 with Amy Joyce. Thank you very much, guys.